thrilled to welcome Joan this evening to share with us her chocolate torte, and she's prepared to answer questions. And I am going to turn this all over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. And it's very nice to be with you. I pass Norwalk all the time when I go to Rhode Island and to Martha's Vineyard, at least twice a year, going up and going down. I'm from Rhode Island. And I thought what I'd do is I would make a simple chocolate torte there's so many similar ones all over. And I really think this went way back to the early Sephardic Jews and sometimes they added almond nuts. Somebody back then in Spain, probably in Spain, learned the chemical differences between when you whipped an egg white, as hard as you could, and combined it with a yolk of an egg and some other ingredients, and it would make food rise. In any event, chocolate tortes are all around the Mediterranean. This one I got from an Egyptian Jew who lives in Martha's Vineyard, and she says that it takes about 10 minutes to make, and it does. I will be serving this at my Passover Seder, and what can I tell you? I thought what I would do is quickly get this in the oven, then move to another place and talk to you a little bit about Passover, and you can ask me whatever questions you have. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, you want to separate eggs, and I'm doing it exactly wrong. I usually separate them the old-fashioned way. There are a lot of different ways that Greeks and Jews from all over the world separate them. This one is the way I usually do it, but there are other ways of doing it. I try to mostly do it so that in case something messes up, I'm not in trouble. I'll show you another way of doing it. This is the way I always make it, but a lot of Greek Jews do it like this. This is what I learned from a Greek Jewish cook. You can, talk while I'm doing this. Ask me questions. And then I just put that in.
Great, so I'll jump in. Hey everybody, I'm Joan. It's good to meet you. I'm Rabbi Paskine, the rabbi in the synagogue. Hey everybody. So I'm the question moderator. So I'm going to ask if you know how to use your raise hand function. That'll let me know you have a question. I can call on you just in case we have multiple questions.
And I'd love to just make this a very back and forth. All right, so here are the egg whites. We're going to mix them.
How many egg whites?
4 egg whites.
Okay.
4 egg whites. You're just going to put them in here with a ½ cup of sugar, a little bit of salt, and
just going to do it until they're actually soft, and then a little bit more. It's hard to talk while you're doing this, but that'll be the only noise you have. If you don't have a toothbrush, so just use your hand. Use your wrist. I do that a lot now. If I stay with my kids in different places, some of them just don't have a.
Joan, I just want to let you know when you have the machine on, it makes it hard to hear you.
And you want it so that, let me just see if this does it yet. It looks like it's pretty. You really want it so you can, well, you can't really do this with this one, but I'm going to do it, make it a little bit stiffer. And you usually can turn it upside down.
All right. Well, I see that Naomi has a question to ask.
Hi. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to, before I lose my nerve, because I'm kind of fangirling right now. I have my Jewish Cooking in America book that I got from a friend for my wedding 25 years ago, and she's a food anthropologist, and she works in food in San Francisco and her whole life, and so it was a very meaningful. And she's actually a Indian descent, but she gave me this book of Jewish cooking, and it was a very meaningful gift from her. So I just wanted to. It's a very important part of my kitchen always, and I have many recipes from here that I use all the time. But here's my question, and this is something my husband makes fun of me for. I'm a terrible baker because even though I understand the concept of measuring and I can do it, I tend to just sort of think that I don't need to. So I'm wondering, you know, when you're cooking or when you're, you know, making your recipes and designing recipes or learning about recipes, how crucial are the measurements, you know, in the recipes that you write to follow?
Baking, I think that we should get this in the oven. So then, okay. But for baking, they're crucial. For regular cooking, not so crucial, because baking is more chemistry. So let's just get this done and then we can go on to questions, okay? So we're going to put the 4 egg yolks in here, just in a, and it doesn't matter if some of the egg white was in there. 1/4 of a cup of sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla, and the chocolate, 8 ounces of chocolate that I've used in an old double boiler that I always like to use to melt it at the top of it with the bottom with water in it. And it's melted a very dark chocolate, very dark. I would prefer very bitter. This is 70%. And then a stick of butter. Okay, so that goes in. Some people might put some old recipes that I found for Passover from France, from Bayonne, which is really the chocolate capital of the world, when Jewish merchants from the New World brought chocolate there. And originally it was used just for chocolate drink, and then it was used for candy. And eventually, chocolate milk was thought to cure the humors. So that was something brought back from the New World. But anyway, this family had a chocolate cake with a little bit of almond meal in it. It was really delicious, and they gave it to me. But then the man kind of got angry with me, so he didn't really want me to have it. But can everybody turn their phones off? Okay, so here you can see how easy this is. Then you just fold in the egg whites. You see how you can pull them up. When you can hold them upside down like this, they're done. So I just needed another second.
Joan, you have a question in the chat. If you're having a meat meal and you keep kosher, what can you use instead of the butter?
Good question. Coconut
That's a
oil.
question from Joni.
You can use coconut oil, and it works well with this recipe. I don't recommend using Harv margarine. I think I'd rather use, in baking, coconut oil today.
Great, thank you.
But in other things, I would use olive oil instead of parve margarine in regular cooking. But parve margarine is chemicals. We don't like to have any chemicals. Okay. Here we go. And this is really it. It's pretty quick. Just want to make it work, blend in. You can use a whisk, but I kind of like using one of these plastic rubber, actually. It's got to get all mixed. Of course, it's not doing it just because I'm in a Zoom teaching class. Any other questions while I'm trying to get this all incorporated?
Yes, Rena's going to unmute and ask you a question.
Hi, quick question for you, and thank you for being here. I'm just wondering, instead of the butter and even instead of the coconut oil, have you ever used walnut oil?
No, but that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, it would be
Start
good.
touching. There you go. Now you can talk.
Thank you.
I use it in salad dressings.
I didn't want to.
I like that idea. So, all right, let me just tell you. So then what you do is with butter, coconut oil or walnut oil, you just grease this. And a springform pan. This is a 10-inch. You could use a 9-inch too. Might even turn out better. And then we're going to put it in a 350-degree oven for about 28 minutes. So I'll go I'll sit down and we can have a chat. Passover is my absolutely favorite holiday for all sorts of reasons. It's the hardest holiday to prepare for sure, but it's the most meaningful, and for so many reasons. I love Judaism for the family meals that it has, as well as the older I get, the services are so meaningful to me. But Passover, I get a chill every time I finally get the whole thing together. My family is there. I mean, this year I'm going to do my big usual Seder, which I haven't done in many years. Of course, everyone is going to have to take an antigen test before they can come over. So there'll be about 40 people. And, okay, so this is, can you see it? I think you can see it. I'm going to taste it.
We want to taste it too. Can you send some to each of us?
So here, I'm going to put it in the oven. And I'm going to put the timer on for 28 minutes. And hopefully Alexis here is helping me just in case something goes wrong. I'm going to have another taste. Okay, we're going to move this over to where I'm sitting on the other side. And then you know what? She just told me that I've only used 4 eggs, so we're going to see what's going to happen to this cake.
What's supposed to be in there?
I thought that she put 6 out for me. She only put 4. So,
Oh, Joan, you went back on mute.
okay. Anyway, what she said is, I only put 4 in, it's 6 eggs. So we'll see what happens to the cake, okay? I promise you it won't happen to you because you'll use the right amount of eggs. That's
Well, we do have some questions lined up, mainly about butter but not exclusively. So Doug, would you unmute and ask your question? Then Jessica, and then Linda.
Hi, it's Sharon. So what is the conversion between a stick of butter and coconut oil?
Well, it would be 8 ounces. Because they're both 8 ounces. Oh, no, 4 ounces. 4 ounces. So you have to
So
weigh it.
it's one to one.
Right.
Thank you.
Great. I think that was Linda's question also.
Actually,
Is
I
that
was
right?
looking at an old cookbook from Germany for my family, my family, and it was talking about how to make a cake. And it said, take an egg and then 4 times the egg, let's say, of the weight of the egg for sugar, and then like 6 times for butter. And that's how people measured until really until the 20th century. So just taking the weight of an egg when you're baking. So somebody was asking about exact measures. That's how they did exact measures. So that's the way they made a pound cake, right? A pound of every ingredient. But it was this was not a pound cake, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Anyway, do you want me to talk a little bit about the how Passover has changed through the years, or do you want to just keep with questions?
Well, we just have a couple more questions that are specific to your recipe, and then I'm sure we would love to hear your views on how Passover has changed. I think we already got to Linda's question, but Jessica has a question to ask.
Hi, I'm a big fan. I have many of your cookbooks and I love to bake. I don't have the recipe in front of me, but I do have a question about butter. I get confused. I don't know if the butter is salted or not salted.
For baking, I always use unsalted butter.
Unsalted, because I'm doing a lot of baking and I notice it's all unsalted, but sometimes they add a 1/4 teaspoon of salt.
Well, but that's not going to be as much as salted butter.
That's not as much. So I was confused. So always unsalted. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. And what kind of chocolate do you use for?
I like trying, well, you know, right now it's been difficult to get whatever you want, especially because, well, I don't have to tell you, but I like using Guittard, Guittard. I like using Kaibo.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Valrhona. The better the chocolate and the bitterer the chocolate, the happier I am. Good chocolate is really important to use.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Just one second.
My question, half of it was answered. Now, is it 4 ounces or 8 ounces? Because
No.
a stick
is 4 ounces. So it's 4 ounces.
Okay.
I get confused because it's 8 tablespoons.
Right.
4 ounces. Because they're 4 to a pound. You get a pound of butter.
And Anne just popped in to ask, how much chocolate are you using in this recipe?
8 ounces.
Thank you.
And really, you know, you just put your big bucks in good chocolate, as long as you're, okay. As long as you're spending, you might as well, I feel that, I mean, if you can afford to do it, that it's a good idea. It's worth it to spend it on good quality ingredients, you know, real vanilla, good chocolate, good butter. You know, sometimes it doesn't make a difference, but sometimes it does. Good olives, one that you're eating, you know, good wine, except for when you're cooking, you don't need it. Oh, what's good butter? Is that?
Yeah.
Well, I like to get it from a farmer's market when they have really good butter. That's really expensive, but it's like twice the amount. You'd sometimes get 2 pounds, really. So it's $12. So it's pretty much the same as a decent kind of butter. I also like the Vermont, what's it called? Vermont butter that comes in a tube. It's unsalted butter. I don't know, sometimes, like I go to a food store called Giant Food, which is right near my neighborhood. And I know that their brand of unsalted butter is the same very often as some of the better butters. Like Alexis, what's the, the one that it's the sort of the good brand in the supermarkets.
Well, I got Plugra.
Oh, yeah, well, Plugra is great. Plugra is great. The French or the English or the Irish butter, but that's only for a special occasion. Like if you're making, last night I had a dinner for Alice Waters. So I made a tarte tatin. And she said she just wanted, which is really a lot of butter. And she said she would only want a little piece. And she ate everything else that was in the pan from on the plate, that was the serving plate. So that's when you know that somebody likes it. And that all a really good tarte tatin is butter, good apples, and what else? Sugar. That's it. I don't use all the really good sugars. I just use what's available, but maybe I will soon. What's the other one? Oh, Kerrygold is another one that's very good. Yeah.
Valerie has her hand raised with a question.
Joan, I have been looking at Passover recipes, trying to plan the Seder this year. And one of the recipes that I came across was your chocolate mousse with olive oil recipe.
Oh, yeah, that's
and I thought it looked amazing. My question is, I get nervous about serving raw eggs. Is there, and I've found that you can get pasteurized egg whites, but I haven't found pasteurized egg yolks. I was wondering, A, does that exist in a non-commercial environment? And if not, is there a substitute or something else?
I think for the most part, I wouldn't get nervous. For the most part, people don't suffer when they're eating this stuff. And I would just go with it. I don't know about bad eggs. There are, but that's something I never worry about. I'm the wrong person for this.
Okay, well, thank you.
It's the same with mayonnaise,
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Valerie. And Bruni had asked a question. Bruni, would you like to unmute and ask?
There we go. I didn't quite hear you when you said how much sugar you put in the egg yolk mixture.
Mm-hmm.
How much was it?
A fourth of a cup.
Okay, I just wanted to verify that. Thank you.
Just remember that what's going to happen right now, either it's going to work or I'm going to use it as a chocolate trifle with fruit in it and serve it as dessert for Passover because I forgot 2 extra eggs. Okay.
Let's hear about Passover and how it's changed, Joan.
Okay, well, first of all, I just returned from Israel and I was in Jerusalem in the Jerusalem hills and near Ein Kerem, for those of you who've been or lived in Jerusalem. And I was sitting on this hilltop with a chef who has a studio there, giving private dinners to family. He doesn't want to have a restaurant anymore. He had a restaurant called Arcadia in Jerusalem. And it was so pastoral. I realized sitting here, and I kept thinking about myself at the time of the Romans. And at that time, they had Passover on all the hills of Jerusalem where they had lambs that were roasting that you were supposed to eat before dawn, because in the book of Exodus, it says that there are 3 ingredients you're supposed to eat at Passover. Do you know what they are? Does anybody know? One person does, yeah.
Just shout them out, you guys. You can do it.
Well, all right. Matzah, unleavened bread.
Bitter herbs.
Maror, which is also marora in Arabic, and all these bitter herbs like chicory and arugula that are growing in the spring in a place like Jerusalem where things don't grow as well during the rest of the year. That's what it is. And then what's the third?
The Passover offering.
Right, lamb roasted before dawn that you could, and you were supposed to eat the whole thing. There were something like 150,000 people roasting lamb in Jerusalem before the destruction of the Second Temple. And that's Josephus, who was a Jew from Rome, who wrote about the history of the Jews. So, you know, I thought about that when I was there last week, actually. And I looked around all the different ingredients that were growing, like there was a vineyard there, there was pomegranate trees there, there was olives there, there were figs there, there were dates, there were, you know, the oats and barley, which are all the 7 species mentioned in Deuteronomy, but there were artichokes and cardoon, which all these things were brought from Jerusalem, and all the skills in growing them were brought from Jerusalem to Rome with the destruction of the Second Temple. And so, you know, maybe they had cardoons there, but I'm not sure everybody ate them. But thistles were something that the Jews were already eating. So carciofi alla Judea, which is a big, delicious Passover dish in Rome, came from Jerusalem, and it went from there to Spain. So all these things, you know, and then the chef was from Kurdistan, and his mother, and these cardoons were growing everywhere. And his mother made like a stuffed cardoon with this long spire, and she probably had made it in Kurdistan forever. So, you know, my breath stands still very often when I think about Passover, and when I realize that what I do, what we all do as mothers and wives or whatever, or just women, and men do too, to make a meal or to cleanse their house, to do a spring cleaning, and to make this meal with many courses, all symbolic, gather people in their house, make it beautiful. It's and try to have different ages and families there together. It's quite extraordinary. And I remember one Passover Seder at my house, after this family had created of friends and family, after the whole thing was over, nobody wanted to leave. And I realized it's a space that we create. And if you create it every year, people want to come back. And I mean, I cut this year off at 40. I'm too old to do more than 40 people in my dining room. But that's, and so anyone who wants to come after that, they can't come. And of course, you know, people know that I do a pretty good Seder. So and I've written about it for how many years for the New York Times. So, and then what I do in my Seder is, I think we have a really great Seder. And unfortunately, my husband died 2 years ago. This is the first big one that we'll be doing with my kids since his passing. And he really led a wonderful Seder. But his spirit's going to be there, and the kids are going to do it together because they want to, they think about these things, and I think it'll be really great fun with them doing it. So we have a relatively traditional Seder, but I'll talk about the food because I know that's what you want to talk about. The first thing that we really do, you know, is have on the Seder plate all the beautiful symbolic dishes. And I always have 3 different kinds, at least 3 different kinds of haroset, because haroset to me is the diaspora, is where Jews went. And it's the whole Passover Seder is a lesson, a historic lesson. I mean, this year you can imagine what people are going to be talking about in their Seder. And it is a moment of talking about from slavery to freedom. But when it comes to I always talk about the diaspora in what Jews brought to the Seder. So I always have either an Iraqi, which is like it's like date jam, which was the historic jam in ancient Israel, but it's almost a syrup, and you put nuts in it sometimes, or you can buy it. I have made it in the past with some Iraqi Indian people, but it takes a long time to do. So you can buy it. It's called, what's it called? Silvan, and there's another word for it, but you can get it at Israeli grocery stores, or probably a kosher grocery store. And a lot of Arab grocery stores have it too. It's just date jam. And then, we have, the first thing that we eat at the Seder is hard-boiled eggs, but it used to be dipped in water with salt. And it's really, I've never found exactly what it means. There's all kinds of interpretations. There's some people that say it's symbolic of going into the Dead Sea, into the Red Sea, and the salt meaning the sadness even for your enemies that died in the Red Sea. There are many other explanations for it. I mean, some ridiculous ones that when I was in Israel, people were telling me. But when I was doing research for King Solomon's Table, I met a woman from Corfu whose ancestors were from Corfu. She lived in Ancona in Italy, and she makes the most delicious hard-boiled eggs dipped in spinach. And I'm taking all kinds of greens and I cook them down. And I made this about 3 years ago, and everybody loved it so much that I changed the tradition of, actually, I forgot that I have to make this one. Changed the tradition of making hard-boiled eggs dipped in spinach to hard-boiled eggs. I mean, from salt water to the spinach, because people liked it so much. And then I always make gefilte fish, and I have 6 women come to my house, and we have a gefilte fish in. You can see it, I think, on the Atlantic website. They have a video of us all making gefilte fish. Everybody brings their own pot. They come into my kitchen, and we just make gefilte fish and have a great time doing it. When my mother-in-law was alive, she would come down and she would make it with us. And I remember she would cook it for 2.5 hours. So she would go to sleep after she showed us how she made it. And we'd cook it for 20 minutes and not tell her, because cooked is cooked. And there's something, the reason I make it every year rather than making in my books, I have what do you call it? A spring form version that, like in a bunt pan, it's really delicious. I make it with halibut. It's going to be in my new book, my memoir that's coming out in a year and a half. No, 2 years, maybe. Year and a half. Anyway, but I make it in patties, the old-fashioned way that she made it from Zamość, Poland. And the reason I make it is because I always remember things that she said, and that when she was making it, she'd make the patties, she'd poach them, and then she'd put them all on a big platter and put the head in the center. And she'd take those eyes from the head and she'd put them in, and of carrots, and then she'd do a mouth, and then she'd sigh. And the first time I asked her why she sighed, and she sighed because she remembered her mother who perished in Belzec, and all of her relatives that perished in Belzec concentration camp. And these are the things that make Passover so important, to remember what was your family and to take out a lot of these old recipes. So that's the second thing that I make. And, you know, everybody comments on it. Not many of the young kids want it, but my husband and his, you know, friends and his siblings, his relatives, they all want it. And a lot of like my Polish Christian friends, they like it. So in fact, I even have a neighbor who every year I make it for him and just bring it over. For some reason, he just loves it. So, and then what I make is, it's just, well, of course, there's matzo ball soup, and I always make it with fresh ginger in the matzo balls. And this year I might add a lot of vegetables that when I was just in Israel, I was with this talk show host. We were cooking together, and he wanted to make his chicken soup for me. And he did it with, in each bowl was like a whole zucchini that you had to cut up yourself, and leeks and carrots and all these things. It made it so alive, and it made me want to make it for Passover. You know, mine is more like a broth and my matzo balls in it, but his had chicken. So I'll see what I'm going to do. And then I make either, well, this year I'm going to do a brisket and also a chicken. I haven't decided what recipe, but I usually do recipes from my books that have some Jewish content in them. And usually I do the brisket that's in my Jewish Cooking in America, which is, I think, my favorite brisket, which is not a savory brisket. It's got a lot of wine and tomatoes and herbs, and my editor just loves that recipe. So I think that's going to also be in my memoir, because she said she wants that one recipe in there because she makes it every year. And what I do is I make it, then I cut it, because whatever you can do in advance is helpful. And then I freeze it with carrots on top, and then everything in the pan that I'm going to bake it in. So it's done. And the chicken, I don't know what I'll make. I'll figure out. And then I always have asparagus, because I think of spring, and that's what you have to have. And I always have lots of vegetable, an asparagus salad, but lots of different vegetables. People bring the vegetables. And then what we do at our Seder is we eat that. And then the children get bored. Mostly they're stuffed because of eating a lot of matzo ball soup with matzo balls in them. And they go, by the way, I make the matzo ball soup way in advance. It's already in my freezer. I mean, at the broth. And they go upstairs and they do a play for our whole family. And the play's always the same play. It's Moses, it's shepherds, it's baby Moses, it's God. Anyway, it's every year, and it's usually children, but sometimes it's people that are 90 years old. It's for every age, and it's what makes our Seder different from other Seders, and it is hysterical. Every single year they go upstairs, they put on all kinds of clothes from my closet, and they're just very, very funny. And we've got lots of different films of the Seder, and sometimes we've had people from NPR that have written about me, and they're in the Seder. I'm hoping that Wolf Blitzer is going to come this year, just because he's a good friend and has never been, and it might be the last time I do it. I don't know, but we do. It's really funny, the people that have come. Sometimes food people have come because, oh, somebody who lived near you was Sheila Lukens, who came one year, and then we had a matzah brai cook-off on Sunday, the next day after Passover for breakfast. So each year it just is so much fun. So then what we do after that is the kids come back, and of course in time for dessert. And I have a whole buffet of desserts. So I'm going to do this chocolate. I'll probably have to remake it, but that's okay. Chocolate dessert. I'll have, I make an almond lemon tart with a lemon curd in between the layers of the tart. That's really good. I always make a kremslach. This year I'm going to make a pizzarella just because I'm finishing my book. But a kremslach is like a matzah fritter from Germany that was something that was always in my family, and my father made it. I mean, he liked it. He never cooked. Didn't know how to cook ever. I'm also going to be doing a meringue torte with chocolate, really good dark chocolate and hazelnuts from my my daughter-in-law's family. Oh, here, is it done? Oh, wow. Okay, so
I think it's going to be a little more cake-like, light cake, by the way it's jiggling.
Oh, okay. Well, no, it's supposed to jiggle. So here it is, and it did it even between, and I'll show you how, what time is it? I don't want to take your time. What time is it?
8:18.
Okay, so let's put it, just let it sit for a bit, and then we'll do a thank you, Alexis. So it's worked, even though it had 4 eggs in it. 6 eggs would be just higher, but it looks pretty good. And then what we just do is we sit around and we finish the Seder, and we just have a really good time, and I love it, you know. It just, anyway, so that's what for me is the best day of the year and the most exhausting. So I don't do a second Seder because I just couldn't do it. I mean, it's just too much. But what that's enabled me to do through the years is to visit other people's Seders, so that I've been to Moroccan Seders, I've been to Iranian Seders, I've been to Iraqi Seders. And so I learn all of their, what they do, their practices, so that I can show them to my readers. And that's, you know, that's what I do when I go and find recipes. I get really excited. I can't believe I've been doing this for so many years, and I still get excited when I find something new for my readers. So any more questions?
Thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. Everybody's sort of like waiting with bated breath for all sorts of interesting ideas to bring to our own Seders. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Marguerite has already invited you for her second Seder, so you've got an invitation.
By all means, come to Stamford.
And there are no trains that stop in Stamford, right?
Oh, sure. You can take a train right from DC to Stamford. And the Seder at my house might be somewhat familiar, because I bet we have dishes that you are familiar with.
From Germany, you mean?
My family's from Germany. So for us, we have to have matzah shallot, and we have to have wine cream for dessert.
Oh, the wine cream is, yeah, I like that wine cream. But I also, if it hadn't been such a strong tradition for my husband's, the gefilte fish, I would have made sweet and sour salmon or carp with ginger snaps in it. That's you can't have that at Passover, but anyway, but you would have that a sweet and sour carp, because that's what they ate, because they never ate any of these traditions. I think that I just came back after I left Israel. I went to Germany, and I visited the little villages that my family had lived in since about the 9th century, when they came from, I don't know where they were before then, but my guess is they might have been from Austria, or just came up the way everybody else did through Rome. And, and what I realized when I went there was that people were peddlers. Jews have been peddlers all over the world. That's how they start, because in Germany, Jews were never allowed to have land. They weren't allowed to have, right now, it just is kind of unbelievable to think about. They lived in little villages till the time of Napoleon, when they were sort of emancipated, and then they could live in bigger towns. So I don't know what, I know that my great grandfather had a cigar store in Ulm, but that's when he was allowed to do that. But before that, I don't know what they did in these little towns, but they, and then when things got bad for the Jews, they moved to another little town, because the Jews were never kicked out of Bavaria.
But I realized it's the same pattern in France, in Poland, the United States. They were all like peddlers, and they'd have peddler centers like Poultney, Vermont, and West Virginia, I forget what town, and Wheeling, West Virginia. And so then 10 families would move there, and they would congregate on the weekend, but they'd fan out in the country store, and then eventually they'd have stores and build communities. And that's how Jewish communities were built all over the world. It's just, for me, it's fascinating. Anyway, that's a little, I'm getting off.
Do you know where in Germany your family was from?
Yeah, my family was from Laupheim and Buchau. And Buchau is where Einstein was from. And my great grandfather and his great grandfather had a grocery store together in Buchau. So and what's also interesting is an archivist told me that the two families came from two different towns, and lots of anyway, it doesn't matter, but these two families that interconnected in Ulm. But before that, there was no intermarriage between Laupheim, which is maybe 100 kilometers away from Buchau. So communities were self-contained, and I guess a lot of people just married their third or whatever cousins. They didn't think about going way out because transportation, whatever. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Indeed. Joan, you have a few more questions to answer here.
Okay.
First from Andrea Greenberg, then from Betsy, then from Marguerite, then from Judy.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this for us. I have two questions. One, how do you freeze matzo balls so that they remain fluffy? And the second one, what is the consistency of your final product that we just made?
Oh, well, we can cut into it. We can cut into it. Yeah, just don't cut into it too much, because I want to say, I'll go in a second. Does it need another minute or two? The last few minutes of the session, I'll go over there and do. Well, let me tell you, the matzo balls. What I do is I make the mix, which is I use a cup of matzah meal, 4 eggs, a fourth of a cup of, let me think, 2 tablespoons of chicken fat, and I use chicken fat when I make them. And then I guess 6 tablespoons of chicken broth. And then I mix it, and I put in it fresh ginger, a lot, maybe 2 tablespoons of fresh ginger, and some parsley or dill for color. And then I make it. Now, I don't freeze. I make the mix a day in advance, and I boil them on. And I've frozen my, what do you call it? My broth. But what I could do is I could make them when I'm making my broth, and then form them and cook them. I always cook them in water, salted water, not in the broth, because if you want a clear broth, right? And if some of the matzo ball just falls apart, then it's not going to be a clear broth. So I do it separately. Some people then put it in the soup and freeze the soup. Sometimes I've never done that. I just like to, that's one thing I like to do.
The day of.
Well, I like to do the day of, but I'm not for such fluffy matzo balls. I like them al dente.
Okay.
So I like to grab onto something. So, so I do that. That's one of the last things I do in the afternoon before the Seder. And the
Okay.
other thing is I make the kremslach because my father liked it. It gives me a chance to think about my father. But I try to be so organized, honestly. And I know I did a story in the Times, a very popular story on my, something about, I can't remember what it was, but it was a timetable on what you should do each day, the day of, the week before, several weeks before. Like I have to dig up my horseradish from my garden, for example. That's one thing I have to do. And I like using the horseradish from the garden rather than, and I like to make my own horseradish sauce. So, these are all things you have to do. Anyway, so that's the answer. You can do it. Lots of people I know do it, and they probably will be fluffier because there's so much broth that will attach itself to them.
Thank you.
And then
Thank you,
the cake will be delicious, I'm sure. And it looks like it came out really well. But let me just see what our timing is here.
Yeah, we have just a couple minutes left.
Okay, and let's do
3
the
other
other
questions.
and then we'll go there.
Okay, Betsy, your question, please.
Okay, this is so much fun. Thank you. I must admit, I share with you the joy of cooking, especially for Passover. It's my time of year for discovering new recipes. But my family always wants the same thing over and over again.
That's good. That's how a family maintains tradition. They will remember those same things. If the same thing that they remember are like sushi at Passover or whatever, the memories, the part of your job as a mother is creating memories. If there are no memories, if you don't work at getting the right foods to them, what are their memories going to be? Because
well, for my family, it's chicken nuggets, and my kids are 36 years old.
Oh, wow.
What about for your family? What's the must-have on the table?
Well, let's see. The matzo ball soup. They all love that for sure. I don't know. They love the kremsel. Everybody loves that. They love the. Some people love the gefilte fish. They all love the hard-boiled eggs. Love the hard-boiled eggs. Everybody's got their own favorite haroset, so that I always know the most popular haroset is going to be the apple nut, traditional American. But then, my mother-in-law, hers was really fine. Mine, I like a little bit more chunk. So I thought, well, what do I do when she died? And I thought, it was the same with matzo balls. She used the mix. I never knew she used the mix, but she did. And I never used the mix. And I thought, what am I going to do? My kids always said they loved their grandmother's matzo balls. And then my son said to me, Mom, we really like your matzo balls. So that's what I've been making ever since. And having that fresh ginger is fabulous in there. So, you can change a little bit your traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And people like the Passover brownies. They like this chocolate cake. People love the chocolate cake. And it's really, as you could see, very easy to make. They like my lemon tart, the lemon tart that I make. And also, my daughter-in-law, that's the other thing. I think it's really important to bring, I like all these old recipes, okay? But to bring this recipe for my Danish Christian daughter-in-law, whose mother makes this schaum torte, which was exactly what my German relatives made, but not with strawberries on top. You could put strawberries on top, but with hazelnuts and bitter chocolate, what could be better? And she's so happy that we include this. So, being inclusive is really a good thing. But also, I totally believe in keeping those old recipes. I used to make, I don't make it anymore, Mrs. Feinberg's vegetable kugel. For those of you who have my Jewish holiday kitchen, everybody liked that. I don't know why I don't make it anymore. Maybe I'll make it this year. But they loved that.
Thank you.
Joan, you got 2 questions left. One goes to Marguerite.
So now I feel like we have to do this again because now I want to know how you make matzo balls. But I have a non-Passover baking question. I love to bake, and one of the things that I make, when I bake pies, I use my own family's recipe for a mirbateish for my pie crust.
The best.
It's the best. And when I make an apple pie, it's fine. When I make a blueberry pie, I toss blueberries with some cinnamon and some flour, and it always is soggy, and the mirbateish gets like soggy, and should I be baking that first? I never do.
Yeah, you should be. What I do with and that's like a butter crust. It's in, if you have any of my cookbooks, you've got that. It's the mirbatei crust. And it's really interesting. It was a cross-European crust. And I think it was kind of middle class. That's what I think. Okay, but anyway, what I do, and I learned this from Julia Child, as a matter of fact, is you put it, I think it's like a 450 degrees oven, 425 degree oven. And then what I do is I cook it for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then I let it down, and then I coat the bottom with like blueberry jam or something that will soak up some of the whatever butter, whatever, it just seems to prevent it, any kind of jam. Then I put in the blueberries and then just bake it off. But it is the best crust.
Thank you.
Marguerite, insider information for you. And I'm going to ask one last question before we go and take a look at the final product. And that is a question that my mom, who's also here but doesn't have video or audio, is also curious about. My two daughters both have egg allergies, which is, doable the rest of the year. Passover is really hard. Do you have any egg-free recipes that you would suggest to us?
Oh, wait a second. Was just thinking about, well, I did learn something. It didn't work that well for me. In fact, I made it for Alice Waters' dinner, and she was happy. They were all happy. She said, just shut your mouth. Don't say anything. Anyway, you roast peppers, and then you take fish. And I think I just didn't add enough. When you get a recipe from a chef, don't trust it. So a chef in Israel made this. It was some tech guy's vineyard, gorgeous house. Anyway, and he had, of course, his own private chef. And he made these, like they were rounds of fish and roasted red peppers and a little bit of breadcrumbs or matzah meal. And I suspect he said 70 grams but it was a lot more that I needed to put in there. Anyway, they all fell apart, but there was no egg in them. And I'll bet you that if you added more matzah meal, they would have worked. Mine just was a disaster. And it was like, oh my God, Alice's Waters is coming to my house for dinner. And so nobody ever mentioned it, and she was happy. Anyway, but.
And anything in the dessert realm?
Well, aren't there non-egg eggs that you can use? Well, you can use, they can't use egg whites either, right?
No. Yeah, it's rough.
It's rough. Yeah, I haven't had that problem yet. Oh, but
you're welcome to come to our Seder, and then you can be
what
free.
It is. I won't tell you what it is, but my article that's coming out for the New York Times, I never let anybody know it, and that everyone is going to love this recipe. You can use this recipe. In fact, I might even say, for people who can't use eggs, and it's a dessert recipe. So you'll have to make it at your Seder.
Okay. Mom, pay attention to that.
Anyway, all right, let's go over here and then.
It sounds quite a bit.
Oh, it fell a lot?
Oh, quite a bit.
Oh, my. Well,
You
this
can
is,
see the bottom if you want.
yeah.
It's
But
really
it-
good though.
but
I've
it-
been snacking on it.
So this, here, let me just, can you put
Yeah.
this up here? Now, this is what?
Those
Oh,
were the,
the
I
other
was
one.
trying to beat
Yeah,
them
I
on the
wish you
side.
I wish you just told me, okay. All right, so here it is. And you know, you could, if you want, let me just get a. So you could, this will be higher. So you could just, see that? Put a little cocoa on, good cocoa. And then what I would do is put some strawberries, just throw some, you don't want to put blueberries. If I had just a few raspberries on top. And then, you know, you just take something and, wait a minute, how do you do it like this? See, just, it'll look, because you, what do you call this, Alexis?
I just call it a lemon zester.
Oh, lemon zester. Is that how, see, and I don't use, anyway, you can just.
It's mostly used for, I think, more for bartenders. It's the
Yeah.
one that has the holes in it.
Anyway, so this, you know, whatever you want to do, you could put, if you want, you can put cream on it, whipped cream. You know, I just think that there's so much being eaten at Passover. The simpler you do it, the better. But if you do like I do and you have this buffet, you want it to be pretty. And sometimes I put a little bit of confectioner's sugar on. You know, you can just use, I would put some, I always have strawberries, by the way. I always have a big pile of strawberries or a strawberry, egg whites and strawberries. You know, what do you call it? What?
Meringue.
A meringue with strawberries. So that's it. Have a great Passover Seder. And any other questions? Nope.
I haven't seen any other questions, but we just want to thank you so much, Joan, for spending this evening with us. You're getting big rounds of applause.
My pleasure, really.
Marguerite, do you want to say anything to close us out?
I'm just so thrilled that you were able to join us tonight, and thank you so very, very much. We're really grateful, and I'm still being a fangirl over here. I feel like a groupie.
And I'd be happy to show you matzo balls sometime.
It's
and
a date.
By the way, I'm speaking at the, I don't know if it's closed, at SUNY Purchase on the 5th of April in person. So.
Well, you're welcome to pop over to Stanford for a cup of coffee and kuchen.
Maybe. So wait a minute, which trains from like Providence go to Stanford?
Amtrak goes right through, goes
Stella or the regular train?
both. They all go through Stanford.
Oh, so I could take the later train. Okay, I'm going to talk to them. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right.
Well, Joan, thank you so much. Marguerite, thank you so much for arranging this amazing program. And thank you all for being with us this evening. I know you had a good time. Join us again for our other 2 Passover cooking demos in the next couple of weeks as you plan out your Seders.
And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.